stream. With guests with Sarah Vike, C4, Insanieac, Jeremy McNeil, and special guest Justin McDonald.
Yeah.
No relation to Tom McDonald?
Fuck.
Fuck no.
God, do you see a grill on these teeth?
Or tattoos on your face and eyes?
You could have a grill.
Or that stupid fucking like giggly laugh he has and all this stupid rap that everybody hates.
I still like how honest he is.
Oh, well,
Aren't you woke?
You know what?
Don't you dare.
Everybody loves how I pop in pills. So today's themes, we have Justin and Sarah. Sarah's here in person.
Hi. I exist. I have a face. It's a shock.
I learned that yesterday too. Actually, you know what? Caden learned that yesterday.
Yeah, right? Or months and months of playing together and we'd never met.
Right? It's like 6 months of D&D, and the first time you met was yesterday.
It's March, yeah. Yeah, crazy.
You actually exist now in his reality.
Right? And
If
he's
we
hitting
all-
the 9.
If we all lived by Schrodinger and we all live by Schrodinger and what am I thinking? Descartes?
Yeah, I think it's Descartes.
Then yeah, you didn't exist until you actually showed up.
Exactly, right? But now I do.
Tell it.
He does too.
Oh, it says I'm not online. Why?
Because it's behind. We'll figure this out, everyone. You know, I existed when you guys were doing your existing thing, right?
I mean, you helped me with my car and drove me to work a couple days, so you definitely exist.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like, you've existed up until the point that you exist now, and I have only existed to you when I helped you.
I think you've existed for about a month and a half.
Yeah, but if I
That's about two. Well, it's about almost 2 months for me now.
well, if I began existing for you guys, thank you for accepting me into your lives, by the way.
I mean,
Then I'm quite the infant, but I don't think I am.
you really are.
Maybe you
You're
are.
so young.
It's the complexion.
All right, so today's topics. I'm a science fiction writer. Sarah here's a fantasy writer, and
Yeah.
over here we have horror. So
I'm DM, so that makes me fantasy.
I was gonna say,
Absolutely.
and Jeremy is a DM, so we are all writers, and that's what we.
I actually am an aspiring writer of fantasy.
Ooh, exciting.
So I guess
knew we were the same, Jeremy.
Yeah, I know. It's the comparisons keep going.
We should just compare our lives sometime.
I know. That could be scary.
It could be.
I think you made a couple religious choices when I chose to go the other way.
Probably.
and look at how full your life is.
I think my life's pretty full.
I would say she's married, and I'm recently out of a relationship where I got shot with a bow and arrow. So I think her choices were better than mine. Yo, man, I'm in the paper, okay? I'm like ghetto famous.
I mean, if you don't think we're villains, I mean, one of us got shot with an arrow, another of us got stabbed. Not
Getting
naming
shot with
names.
an arrow doesn't make him a villain. It makes that he was dating a villain.
It turns him into a villain.
I was very close.
I mean, who dies in comic books? The good guys or the villains?
The good guys.
Jeremy.
And I didn't die. I was not allowed.
You weren't allowed to die?
No, I was not allowed.
Huh.
Is there a picture?
I don't know many people who've been shot with a bow and arrow from 15 feet away, and that thing only bounced off my ribs.
I know someone who shot himself in the hand with a bow and arrow.
That is hilarious.
It is. It is.
It makes me feel a little better about myself.
Okay. We were at summer camp. He picked the long.
I didn't do it to myself.
Whoa! So at Christian summer camp, a man decided to shoot himself in the hand.
Okay, man is a bit of a
Wow.
stretch.
Wow.
So the two of us were 17. He is 22 days older than me. And he
That's
always,
pretty manly.
when we were younger, he always held that over me that I'm so much older than more mature than you, and it's literally 22 days. 3 weeks.
It sounds like that hurts you more than him.
It did not. It makes me laugh. Anyways, walked up to me at lunchtime one day, like with this serious expression on their face and like their hands on their hips, and they were like, "We're older than you, and we're gonna do archery later, and I know you teach it, but you don't need to teach us because we know what we're doing."
Oh, jeez.
So this guy, he grabbed the biggest bow.
Famous last words, by
Yeah.
the way. We know what we're
Oh
doing.
yeah. No, famous last words are, "Hey mom, look what I can do."
Backwards, and he was shooting with it strung backwards, and I had to fix that for him. And then, with this giant recurve bow, he picked up the smallest arrow that is usually used on these like little dinky kids crossbows, and he drew it back, and he drew it back so far that the arrow was actually like off of the bow, and it went straight into his hand.
Oh my. That
He
makes
then
more
ripped
sense.
it out and ran through the woods bleeding.
Do we, at that point, just yell karma?
Pretty much.
Not help him and just go karma?
He,
Well,
he ripped
that's
it
the
out and
question.
ran through the woods bleeding, and I told one of his friends to follow him. He called his parents to tell them what had happened, and they laughed at him.
Good parents. I
Yeah.
would do the same.
Yeah.
I would be like, no.
Yeah.
The only thing you get from me is idiot of the month.
We've already started making a new one.
He does have a younger brother.
Why do you think you went to camp that year?
Oh, brutal, but
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I went to camp. Let's carry on now.
All right, so fantasy stories, or just writing in general. I'll start with me. I went to school. I have a degree in classics of English lit. I usually write science fiction, mostly short stories. I do have a couple big projects I'm working on. The closest I've ever gotten to fantasy writing is I have a buddy named Shlomo in Toronto, and he's actually writing the fantasy version, and we're writing a two-part story where it's like it's two halves. I've told Justin about this, but
Not me.
I'm usually not big into high fantasy. My dream is to write science fiction. I love science fiction. I love the whole idea that I don't know. I just find it jives with me better. Not so much Dune, more like Foundations or Brave New World, or I mean, Mary Wollstonecraft, not Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, um, and so like my fantasy story. Oh, my favorite fantasy writer, by the way, is Neil Gaiman.
Mm-hmm.
I love all his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. Just it always seems to be, for me, the best fantasy because he grounds everything in reality and just twists it a little.
He is good.
My fantasy story I'm writing with Shlomo is the idea is it's two girls that were girlfriends, like lovers, and they're about to go to university together, and there's a car accident. Or no, one of them's at home and the other one gets into a car accident. The one that stays home, that's my story. So it's about her becoming a lawyer, going back to the town, trying to find her lover, finding out there's this underground, like, because they're from Alabama, it's an underground group, and everyone's connected to the KKK, and it's just this whole, and it's about her slowly going through and getting these people prosecuted, and basically I'm writing a crime thriller in that sense. And then Shlomo is writing the other half of the book, where it's this girl, she's driving a car and she runs over something, like the other lover, and it turns out to be a guy in shining armor, and the sword starts talking to her like, "You just killed the hero," and she goes, "What?" And she's like, and starts talking to her, and she's like, "No," and she's about to drive away, but she can't, and she gets pulled into a fantasy realm.
Oh, cool.
And it's high fantasy. But the entire thing is in my story, the one you read first, is she'll dream and she'll have glimpses of her lover, and she'll see her in a mirror, and she'll like see her and think she's talking to her, but she thinks she's going crazy. And at the end of my story, she hears a loud bang out in front of her door of her apartment, and she gets up to go open the door, and it ends. Shlomo's story is about this girl trying to get back home, and she sees her lover slowly grow up, become a lawyer, and she'll learn things about what's happening in her reality, and tries to help her. And you see it from the complete other side. And then the last part of his book is she finally gets home, lands in front of the apartment, and goes up and is about to knock. And the way we want to write it is, or the way I'm trying to write my part, and he's trying to write his, is you don't know what's real. You know my character is real, but you don't know if his story is actually my character's imagination of what happened.
Oh.
And
That's
she's
cool.
actually imagining herself as her lover, wearing, like, fighting to find the truth. And so that's how we want to write it, and that's kind of one of my big projects right now is try and write this story in such a way that it's both at same, because crime thriller is so hard. Oh my fucking god, is it hard? I mean, if you don't know the law when you're talking, you might as well just give up. Because as soon as you say something wrong, or especially like the area you're talking, so like I want to focus it on Alabama. So like I'm reading through so much different Alabama law, and like no, but like because I want it to be right, right?
Yeah.
Like John Grisham, I've read a lot of his biographies. Will to say all the time, if you want to write a good thriller, you have to know what you're talking about. Like he was never really in the military, but he does a lot of reading, and so that all his crime thrillers or his political thrillers all are grounded in reality. So they you can then spin off that. That's why I've never been good with fantasy. Um, I can't ground myself in fantasy. I think it's too ridiculous, personally.
Well, it's tedious. It's actually tedious to try to create the politics instead of draw upon like what's going on, like in an actual political sense.
Where science fiction, I find it. I've always found it easier.
You've got the world.
Oh, my mic's turned down. Here, I'll turn it up. Do. Thank you. Is that better? Oh, that's too loud.
Oh, that was about the start of an Aphex Twin song.
There we go. Hopefully that helps. Idiot Pants Pod. Thank you.
Quite the name.
Hopefully that helps. I can't really tell. But yeah. So like, and I've briefly met Margaret Atwood. She came to Mount Royal.
Really?
Yeah, she was here. Well, she's actually going to UFC for a talk, and I briefly met her.
Wow.
And I was able just to talk with her, and she told me, especially if I'm writing science fiction, the best way to write science fiction is have a beginning and a middle.
No end?
No. The best way to write science fiction is let the end come to you over time.
I'd say she's right.
Because with science fiction, you want your characters to grow. You want people to be connected to your characters, and it can be really hard if you have an end already. And I've noticed that. But other than that, yeah, that's science fiction, really. Let's move on to fantasy.
So I have been writing since I was like 7. I actually have this really adorable little book that I made that I like typed on a typewriter called The Magic Dance Slippers. It's real cute. And like these books that I've written that are in duotangs that I wrote in junior high. But my real love is high fantasy. I actually really love world building. It's my favorite thing. I brought it with me. I have
visuals.
My own world.
To be honest, Sarah, I would love to come over to your house and go over to your world building.
Please do. I would love it. Can you see it?
Because you said you have a map and everything, and I was like, oh, I would love that.
If you're watching the stream right now, it's actually on the stream.
And I have a quick question before you continue. Lots of people know what fantasy is, but can you describe to me what exactly is high fantasy?
High fantasy.
I can do that.
Do I need to be high?
No, but it might help.
I mean, it helps.
So I had a class where I had to study this, actually.
Okay.
And there can be different definitions. The one that I ended up running with was it's fantasy in a separate world that is made up.
That's high fantasy, huh?
High fantasy.
I enjoy that. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
The rinks.
Yeah, so I've got that world. I've got a whole language that I made. language. You can write in it. You can speak in it.
Yeah, you said you were gonna get that tattooed.
Probably eventually, yeah. What I got tattooed now is just like the English alphabet. But eventually, I would love to get some of the language that I made up tattooed.
I should have waited for my tattoo.
Yeah, it's super cool. Anyways, yeah, I have this whole world that I've made up, and my plan is to write. There's 5 books that I want to write, all set in this world over a span of about 2,000 years, from creation through to this later generation, and it's they're elves, so they live a long time. But it's through 4 generations of one particular family, and about how kind of the rise and fall of a monarchy and an empire and magical powers. So yeah, that's where it's at. I'm reasonably close to being done the first one right now. I mean, it obviously needs a decent amount of work, but it's
Well, it's. I don't want you to give away any story elements, especially being close to the finish. But like how when I talk about what I'm writing, I'd like to touch on how I wrote it. So, like, how do you find you had any kind of unique approaches to your writing style?
I like writing third person omniscient.
Okay.
So seeing from above, basically.
Yeah.
I don't really love seeing inside people's heads. I love seeing from the outside what they're doing and what they're saying. I also really love writing dialogue. I know that I have a lot of dialogue and that it is the main driver of my story at many points.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, does your story follow one person or more than one person?
More than one person. The first book follows these 3 people. Their names are Leilani, Nyafin, and Talina, and they are 2 queens and a king of this world. And it follows them as they are ruling their kingdom and defeating evil darkness.
Are they both the wives of the king?
They are not. They are friends.
Okay.
They are not.
That's very nice.
Yeah,
no. Not a polygamous relationship.
No romantic involvement between the 3 at all.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. They are
much.
friends. They were chosen to be the leaders by contests because they are all elves and they have these magical powers. And some elves have these powers and some don't. But there's 3 different types. There's Mindalin, which is sort of power of the mind and it's power over other people. There's Hafin, which is power over the earth itself. It's like dirt, rocks, water, stuff like that. You can manipulate it.
Oh, yeah.
And there's, what's the last one called? Rogallo, which is power over other living things, so animals and plants and... Yeah. Yeah, so Leilani has power over other people, Talina over the earth, and Nyafin over other creatures.
I like how you still have, like, you carry through the respect that one would kind of think an elf would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's very cool. I like how you touched on that.
It's funny because when in my science fiction book that I'm writing, I choose like the main story I'm writing is a separation between biometrics and augmentation. So the entire idea I'm doing is it's thousands of years in the future, where you have people have decided to either biochemically upgrade themselves or do it using technology, and so that created a huge wedge in humanity. But my story is about Vermilion, or a guy who's he's an original human, and through means he eventually finds himself in the middle of this break, and basically this whole war stops because they realize there's a real human. And so he all of a sudden becomes the focal point of the galaxy, because the entire story is his ancestors, or I guess his relatives, distant relatives, they were able to erase the location of Earth. So humanity lost Earth, and then all of a sudden they don't find Earth, but they found a human. And so the entire basis about science fiction is you want to either return to something or you're exploring sort of a dystopian add your thing here. It's the best way to work with science fiction because it's like even Foundations, which is considered well the book of like there's actual names for them, but I call them the Foundations, which is Isaac Asimov series, which is supposedly the most likely progression of humanity. It still works with a basis that this is how humanity will progress, and if we go the same route, this is how we'll get there. One of my favorite science fiction books is called We, by I have the book here.
He's looking. Give him a minute.
Be
back. We'll be back.
Do 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 do.
Well, let's say I can't. It's a Russian writer, and the point of the book is everyone has numbers.
Ooh.
And they live in this dome city where you can do whatever you want. And it's about the architect, the guy who built it. And they're about to leave the Earth, but the way they want to leave the Earth is they want to leave the Earth in ruin because they think that everyone who lives outside this dome is a savage. Essentially, it's based on the same idea of Brave New World, essentially, except it's more isolated.
God, that's so carnal. And, you know what I mean?
No.
Well, just
Straight savagery.
They're in a dome and they're judging the world.
Well, that's the point.
From inside their dome,
That's the
right?
point. It's supposed to be the entire thing's an entire commentary on communism.
Yeah, exactly.
And
economy class.
Oh, maybe you can't hear us. Wah! Just wondering.
If you want to be my lover,
Yeah.
I heard that.
my friends, make it last forever.
Mike's not picking up. Pike's picking you up pretty good, Jeremy, but not us.
Yeah, that's true. You are louder.
Oh, I see. That's funny.
Yeah, it is a
funny.
little bit.
Why is this blinking?
It's telling me
fun.
the status it's on.
Oh yeah, Jeremy's way louder.
Yeah, I know. Let's do this a bit. See if that helps.
Now don't go wasting my precious
And you're the one
time.
with like the $1,000 mic and shit.
Get your act together.
Well, you're still going through the mic, I think.
And we'll be just fine.
You come through his speakers and then into the mic.
Discord. That's weird. That's even weirder.
There we go. I just had to turn up the microphone gain and turn you down. All right.
Yeah, we're about the same now.
Yeah, that's better.
Cool.
Pardon the upwards arms.
Sorry for anyone who was listening and couldn't hear shit. That's the problem. Oh my god, some guy. Anyway. And now I keep hearing myself in the television. So let's just turn that down. All right. And we're back. Yeah, so I just so like I said, like I don't know how to write horror. Oh god, horror's so hard.
Yeah, I bet.
Like let's be fair, like
you have to know exactly where you're going all the time.
But then again, I mean,
no.
But then again,
no, not really. But you have to know people's fears.
Yeah, that's true.
And
intimately.
Well, not even people's fears. You just have to know how to. Because I mean, I've never read a horror that's jump scare, but like one of my favorite horror books is almost like a comedy. Shadow over Innsmouth.
Is it possible? Sorry, I'm familiar with Shadow over Innsmouth, but is it possible to have a jump scare book?
Yeah.
Oh, totally. So. Choose Your Own Adventures. They were the original jump scares.
Okay. Well, is there any other way? Because I don't think so.
Yeah. If you're a good writer, and if you ever read It, a lot of the jump scares would come from the next page. Stephen King would purposely end, and that's why he hates when you make his books smaller, because he purposely writes his books, and he's talked about this. He writes them to be a certain size.
Yeah, I would do the same.
So that when you flip the page, jump scare.
I would do the same.
Interesting.
And I was planning on doing something like that as well, so that's interesting.
I mean, one of the books I've always wanted to write, horror kinda, or one of my we could say my magnum opus if I ever became a writer, would be a Choose Your Own Adventure. There's only 7 ends. Each
Fair.
end is always the same. You die of being a drug addict. You lose your life because you kill yourself. You like, and all these are actually the 7 different forms of depression. Basically the seven, and what I'd want is the book would be like this thick.
That's too big, man.
No,
That
because
is
the point of the book,
massive.
You never get through it.
is no, it's an encyclopedia. You choose your job. That's how you start the book. So you can be actor, billionaire, tech
You
mogul.
can choose billionaire as your
Well, you know what I mean.
job.
Tech mogul,
Teacher?
oil tycoon, teacher.
Even the shittiest.
And it
walks of life.
doesn't matter what your choices are.
You still die.
You always go to those 7 ends. Would be the point of the book. Is where usually you have a
That's a
choose.
depressing job.
No, that's the point. The
Welcome
point.
to life.
The point of the book is it would be a melting pot. Is my goal would be in the book, because in a choose your own adventure there's usually thousands of different ends in a good one, and there's only one starting point. I'd want to flip that on its head. You can pick any job. So if you always wanted to know what it's like to be an actor, so you'd go to the actor and you'd read this whole actor, and it'd have choices that you'd make. It doesn't matter your choices. You'll end up shooting yourself in a back alley because you have no money and your family hates you. And here's the beauty, but here's the beauty of it. It doesn't matter what job you choose. I would write it in such a way, if you made the right choice, that's where your end would be. And the goal would be to essentially humanize people.
Okay.
Because I'm a huge humanist. If that's even a word, that isn't. I'm a huge.
It is, but I don't know if it means what you're going
Well,
for.
I'm a huge realist in that sense.
Okay, there we go.
A humanizer.
And so like when I read about people, like, because I hate e-talk, and I hate the idea of following the lives of celebrities.
Yeah.
And so you idolize them, right? And so my goal would be for this book to be like someone you idolize. Like, let's say you idolize a tech tycoon. And then basically I'd want to write it in such a real fashion that no matter what your choices are, everyone ends up in the same shithole.
Well, that's cool, and you probably would write it in the sense of like it would be as flashy and provocative as just watching e-talk and hearing about all these things about celebrities.
That would be a
to
goal,
somebody
yeah.
who watches them. Yeah, that's curious. What would you? First thought to my head. What would you name that book?
The Black Book.
Interesting.
I haven't thought of a name yet, but that would be it'd have no name. It would just be a big black encyclopedia,
I think you would need a name
like the black, like
for that.
Yeah.
In my head, I was just like life,
ooh,
Death.
No,
and then it ends with death.
the
always.
the encyclopedia of
There's
death.
no way to live. Yeah, that's good. That works. The encyclopedia of death.
Yeah.
So horror. How do you write horror?
Fuck, it's a big process. What am I trying to say? It's along the lines, what I'm doing at least, as your high fantasy realm, where you're kind of like with what I'm writing is you're developing a world,
Yeah.
the politics, the everything about it, from like what money system is there to how people approach each other in a bar to how gravity works, is the style that I'm writing.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
as a precursor to it.
you're writing high fantasy horror.
Yeah, you could say that. Absolutely. It's,
Just on that note, isn't most horror high fantasy? I mean, you could also have science fiction horror, like War of the Worlds.
yeah, essentially.
I guess that's the beauty of horror, is you can bleed over.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the beauty for it. And it's not, it doesn't make it easier, but it does make it more inviting as a writer, I would say, or as an imaginative
Well, it's nice when you can
mind.
control.
The problem is
Yeah.
like Stephen King, for every one book that everyone knows, like I'm sure anyone can name a Stephen King book.
Yep.
If you ever look at his anthology, there is literally like 50 that you've never heard of.
He writes so many books.
He does.
Like,
He does.
how?
But I mean, like,
Cocaine.
even Lovecraft wrote some of the greatest horror of his time, did not become famous till he died. And that was because of his wife. His wife pushed his horror books. And then not even his wife. Like there are things people attribute to Lovecraft, like Cthulhu. Not part of the Lovecraft mythos. Part of the extended mythos. Those are people who were Lovecraftian in their writing who added to the mythos.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he never wrote a damn thing about Cthulhu.
That's crazy.
That was added to the
That's
mythos.
not a thing.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things, but they call it Lovecraftian because the writers at the time just they attribute it to him.
Well,
They
Yeah, it's like invoked a style of writing.
yeah, that's really what it's become.
It's it's not even. It can even go deeper than that, where he invoked a fear, and those people are expressing their fears the
That's
same
true,
way as
too.
he had.
Yeah.
I mean,
Cosmic horror is a
Yeah.
thing.
being
That's-
raped by tentacles is a fear,
Well, actually, yeah. What I'm intending to write
or
is
good porn.
great porn.
I mean,
Yeah. So yeah,
Black Bible.
I'm intending to do
Black Bible.
a mix of cosmic horror. You see, I have a
You've
big
mentioned it before.
I have a big problem with being static in your genre selection.
Yeah.
Just for myself, of course, but I would like to include many different genres. But I think, John, I need a bit of a deeper question than like, how do you write horror?
Well,
Yeah,
okay. So you've told me about a few books that you've been thinking about writing. Tell me the difference if you even thought about this. How much harder is it for you to write spiritual and fantasy horror over science fiction horror?
Well, I've got both on the go right now mentally. Science fiction is hard. I have one based loosely in reality, and it's very difficult to like jump into exactly what's going to freak people out. So the story has turned into more of like a monster anthology, and becoming expressive of deeply what those monsters are made out of and why they scare the main character. As apart from fantasy, though, fantasy I find is easier because you have no holds bounds. You can kind of freely, what I do, fucking sit in the dark and just imagine shit, and whatever seems cool, you elaborate deeper on, because everybody has a fear you can touch on, and you can't just touch on one fear in a like, let's say, a few pages.
Which is funny because I mean, Frankenstein is technically a fantasy sci-fi horror.
One of
Yeah,
the originals, yeah.
Yeah, and she's able to touch on all three. She takes something that goes in reality, and then like I mean, and like the horror was from not even from the perspective of the reader, but the point was that Dr. Frankenstein was scared that people would think that the monster is him.
Precisely.
And now we look like
Mhm.
150 years later, and there are people who've never read the book, and they think that Frankenstein is the
monster.
name.
Yeah.
But you're like, no, that's just how well it's written.
Well, you know
Yeah.
what's the funny thing about that is that concept that you just spoke of is actually more of a Japanese concept of giving the monster a personality and giving him a backstory.
But that's also rooted in their history, right? Like you have
Absolutely.
so many yokai,
Very
or
deeply.
that's Japanese word for demon or spirit. Yeah, I'm not a weeb.
No, me either. I
that
didn't know
it like they all have like, but that's the point of Japanese demons, right? Is there's not a pit or a void they're from. They are simply emotions and the actions of people that have taken form, either
Default.
from that person or they've been a manifest of all those.
Yep.
But then at the same time, like you get like, if we go back to horror to you for a second, like when you focus on your horror, do you go for more of a fathomable horror or more of an unfathomable horror?
I try to sit on the edge. Absolutely.
Interesting.
One of the creatures I have, he's deified through anguish, and through that anguish, basically what he does is he contorts muscle and he contorts bone, and he recrafts it to kind of become his vessel. But if you think a little bit deeper about that, when you're in anguish or when you're stressed out, your body is tight. You're always contorting your body and you're in pain, so you're causing yourself a lot of grief subconsciously. So there's just so many different facets of a character that should be considered. And when you said that people read Frankenstein and they didn't consider that, that wasn't even the name of the creature, it's exactly the same premise, where some people seen Frankenstein and thought that was the name of the creature and thought it was about him, so they focused on him, nobody focused on, in the Western culture, at least, on the Doctor. And then all of a sudden, when people started focusing on the Doctor, people became scared of the Doctor more than the monster.
No, that's the point. The
Exactly.
the monster's docile.
Exactly.
Like that's the whole thing. So you would say you're more psychological or body in terms of your horror?
What I'm writing now is a solid mix of both.
Solid mix of both. So and do you bring in philosophy? Because I know a lot of horror writers do bring in a lot of philosophy, like like going back to Stephen King, or let's go back to Frankenstein since we're using it. I know from reading dialogues by Mary Shelley that she was heavily influenced by Descartes and the entire idea of the self. And so that's Dr. Frankenstein, the scientist, obviously reflects that a lot. If you read Frankenstein, a lot of it's all from his perspective, and so a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the narrative is from the mind of Dr. Frankenstein, and it's always a fear of being seen as the other, or seen as the villain, or seen as the monster. Okay. And so when you get to the final scene of the book, spoilers for anyone who hasn't read Frankenstein, and he's chasing the monster across the Russian tundra, he says the moans and screams he hears, he thought were the monster, he realizes are him crossing the tundra looking. And that's kind of the image she leaves you with, is you basically have this doctor walking through with a torn cloak, screaming for this monster, making monstrous sounds, but because the monster doesn't talk, doesn't make any noise. It only has actions.
It's very metaphorical of just like fear embodied.
Yeah, so it's very self, and then you go to Stephen King, and he's very much body horror. A lot of his horror, even Goosebumps, you could say, are very much body horror, because it's not about what's in the mind, it's about what's in front of you, what's affecting you. A lot of people say there's spiritual horror, but I argue that kind of crosses into reflective, because when you do things like, I've never read a book that does spiritual horror as well as movies. It's one thing that I find film has up on that kind of horror, because when you're trying to write a good ghost story, I actually have a book of them. They're not as easy. It's better told, you know what I mean, than read. Like one of my favorite stories. And I'm going to quote this correctly before I say it, because I'm that kind of guy, because I don't want to mess up. One of my favorite stories. It's right here. Perfect. Got it first time. This is from a compilation book by Neil Gaiman. This story, because I'm going to quote it a lot, is called Blood by Roddy Doyle. And it's a horror. And what it is it's about one guy and his wife, but the focus is him, and he's the narrator. And the reason I bring it up is because the story is about him slowly realizing he wants blood. He's not a vampire or anything, but he slowly realizes he really wants blood.
It's great because first off, it's unknown.
Yeah, and so he starts eating raw meat, and he try to sate his lust, and it's like it's not enough. And eventually, as the story progresses, one night he jumps the fence over to his neighbor's hen house and eats a bunch of live chickens.
Yeah.
And then this is near the end of the story, and his wife brings it up and says, "Well, there was bunch of chickens died. He thinks it was a coyote." And then she looks in and then she's folding his clothes and looks in the pocket of his jacket, and there's a head of a chicken. And in the complete change in the story, how you think it would work, she looks, and he looks very guilty, right? As he's narrating the story.
Oh, don't tell me she likes it.
She asks him, "How was it?" is the last line.
Oh, that's beautiful.
How was it? And
that's the fear.
And his answer is, "It felt great."
Influential.
Fucking great.
That's influential horror.
And then it ends.
Yeah,
it ends right there. And it's one of my favorite horror stories. It doesn't say vampires. It
Oh,
doesn't.
dude.
It doesn't talk about what her reaction was. It was just that question and the way they describe it and how bland it comes across.
Huh.
Okay, so here's I'm not writing in any of those styles, but the last thing you just told me is closest to my style, and I don't know if these are the right words. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, but I would like to
I
write.
will.
I would like to write horror in the style of aggregate tension and emotional foreplay.
Aggregate tension and emotional foreplay.
You see,
You have to explain if I know you're using it correctly.
So the tension is just like a build up, a constant build up through the entire book of moments of tension building and never fully reaching a climax, until like certain sequences of the book, but they're always built and built and built and built.
You cock tease.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
That's part of the fun, though, right? So
Is
that's
it?
that's meeting all requirements. You're not just tipping your hat to the horror readers. You're also tipping your hat to those ones that like this sort of tension.
Mm-hmm.
For the emotional foreplay, it's going to be a mix, like definitely a tease. That was the whole mindset going into it of relations and relation building, and like preceded. No, I can't remember the word. Just like relations not ending the way they fucking should. Definitely a cock tease in the way of like this character is part of the quest and has become to you, the reader, a main character up until a certain point. And then suddenly they're just fucking ripped.
That's going to be so hard to write because one of the hugest cruxes to writing is emotional payoffs.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, what you're saying here is you want to write stories like I'm sure Jeremy can attest to this when he DMs. Like people put their emotions into things, people put their lives into things, and even books. And if there's no emotional payoff or it doesn't come across as a way that pays off, even if it's not what they expected, if there's not a payoff, people get extremely frustrated.
That's why I can't write a book who is like third person in your state of writing. It needs to be a first person perspective.
Yeah, it would have to be.
That's why it's a tough go for me to progress sometimes. Is because like this main character has to have this emotional progression, but they have to have these people around them who are like fulfilling and following through. So that's where the emotional shape.
Have you ever read Game of Thrones or that style of book where it's all first person, but it's written from the different viewpoints of everyone?
That's what's going to happen. Chapter based. That's what I'm planning on.
So you will be, because I mean, I don't think George R. R. Martin invented that style by any means. I think Dune did. I think Frank Herbert was the proponent was the first person to write in that kind of style where you have
Very cool. That wasn't even too long ago. That's interesting.
Yeah, no,
I've read plenty of books in that style.
I'm trying to think of. I mean, I know Ernest Hemingway did it a bit in The Sun Also Rises, but it's mostly through. Oh, you're gonna make me think through. I mean, but I mean, the biggest book that I can think of where there was no emotional payoff, or where it left readers with no emotional payoff, and it's kind of a horror, is Heart of Darkness. I mean, in that book, it's about if for anyone who doesn't know what Heart of Darkness is,
you're gonna have to explain all the books.
That's fine. I do a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Jeremy, do you know what Heart of Darkness is?
The book series?
It's only one book.
No.
Okay, so it's written in the 1800s, late 1800s. The idea is, so before the book starts, you have this guy named Kurtz. He was sent to Africa to get more ivory because they were not getting a lot of ivory in the Congo. And all of a sudden he went and the ivory started to flow. And Marlowe, the main character, actually is sent to kill him. He's gone. He doesn't know why, but he's gone too far off the deep end. This Kurtz, and the entire visual, like, it's very body horror because it's very visceral on what he sees, because it's about Joseph Conrad's actual travels to the Congo and watching people getting their hands cut off, and the brutality of it. And that's where the quote, the horror comes from. Because you have Kurtz who's doing this huge monologue.
Wait, the horror, that one.
Yeah, that exact one. That's from Heart of Darkness.
Oh, cool.
Oh my God, we all learned something new today. Well,
Except you.
you guys did. But
I'm
what
sure we can teach you something.
the reason that's such a not a payoff is Kurtz dies. I won't give away how that happens, and Marlowe just goes back, and it's like he leaves it all. He just decides he doesn't want to deal with it. He's gone to the heart of the Congo, which is the heart of darkness. And I know. There's a reason why this book is very controversial.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he eventually goes back, and that's what a huge. I mean, it's why it's not just why it's a controversial book, but it's one of the reasons why it's such a hard read, because you have these very visceral moments.
It's true.
And these very it's a very small book. It's only 127 pages,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's very dense.
I must take a pee break.
Very dense.
I will stand up so I'm under your way.
Oh,
Thank you guys. Sorry for breaking up the scene. Right back.
but yeah, no, it's in terms of horror, it doesn't have that payoff that most horror do.
That would frustrate me.
And
I don't think I'd want to read that.
well, it's a really great read. It's one of those.
I think it would just frustrate me too much.
Well, I mean, it would frustrate you when you spend like 2 pages just describing a man's face.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like,
I don't deal well with that.
What? And then you had to I've had to reread that book a few times, but like there's literally an entire chapter that's dedicated to this woman's face.
Wow.
And it's just an entire chapter. But Joseph Conrad, like, what a great writer. It's too bad the book is very controversial. And I mean, I can see why. I've read it enough times. Yeah. I know why. He is not very nice to the Native Africans, even though the book is supposed to be anti-slavery. Well,
you said it was written in the late 1800s, right?
It's not pro. It's it just does them no justice. But at the same time, if you're looking at the comparison of monsters in that book, I mean, it is definitely the white people that come across as the more monstrous in that book because of the things they do and the ambivalence that they show towards the people that they basically rule over forcefully. But yeah, let's move to something kind of like that. So tell us, Jeremy, how does DMing in Dungeons and Masters equivocate to writing? Oh, I just had a huge brain fart there.
I mean, it transfers over pretty easily. Like Wizards of the Coast have been doing it for a while now with all of their books.
But I'm talking more about you because you've been a long time DM. You have over 10 years in the bucket, and I mean,
some of it very crazy.
I've slowly over the last year, being in one of your campaigns, have seen not just the level of detail that you've put in, but the level of detail that's just come out, and how much of that is you, how much of that is other players, like how much of yourself do you actually pour into a campaign, into the story. Like, if I were to...
At the start, a lot more than I did now, but, I mean, I was more of a railroady DM at the start, like most people are, right?
I get what you mean.
Easier that way, right? If running a pre-made campaign is just really easy. It teaches you all the little things that you need to know. And then after that, you can start applying that to more, like, not pre-written, self-made, homebrewy stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, creation just kind of flows after that. Like, I'd say my world is probably 60% me now. And a good 40% of my players.
Are you aiming for 100?
Because I like their choices. Their choices are what drives the story.
Like trying to cut off their own eyelids?
Yes.
I wonder who could have done that.
That sounds like a horrible idea. Who would be stupid enough to do that?
It?
Jesus.
Especially with an enchanted sword.
Really?
While wearing a mask.
That's horrible.
Right?
Why would you let them do that, Jeremy? That just sounds like they're making a dumb decision.
Don't let anybody do anything. That is not my... I do not control your actions. You're your own free person.
Well put.
That is not my style.
Yeah.
No, I like the free choice. The free choice makes the game way more interesting.
Are you aiming for a balance of 60-40, or do you want to go further?
Originally the balance was like 80-20 in my favor, right? Because I liked that control, but the more I tried to exert my control over it, the less control I realized I actually had.
Mm-hmm.
You do give us a lot of control.
So it's like choose
For
your.
sure.
So what you're saying is you essentially write it like a choose your own adventure, except you're not choosing. You're
Yeah,
letting
exactly.
you're letting the reader or the players essentially choose their adventure, and you're pulling up the veils as if you're standing there with a curtain. It's like choose your door. Oh, you chose this one.
Exactly.
Roll it
No,
down.
half the time I don't even know what's behind some of those doors. I know what's behind 2 of 3 of those doors, but that third door is usually a mystery, and 9 out of 10 times that's the door the players choose.
Does that freak you out?
Has that ever freaked you out, or has ever been lost because of
To
that?
start, yes, absolutely, because you don't know what to fucking do with that, right? Like I had to call ends to sessions and shit because I didn't know what the fuck to do next. Like I'm lost. Where are we? I don't know. And
you
as
mean
a DM,
like
you can't say that. If you don't know as a DM, you're not doing your job.
Oh, jeez.
So that's actually something my husband was talking about earlier because he just started DMing for me and his sister and my brother and another friend. His sister in our very first session, his very first time as DM, she had a bunch of goblins come up to her and they were attacking her. And she just said, "Stop, stop," and like tried to become friends with them. And he didn't know what to do. He was talking earlier about how like he was just totally stunned, like, what do I do now?
That's so good.
How do I handle this?
Yeah.
I mean,
Did the goblins stop?
well, that's actually a
What
good.
They did, yeah.
That's a good thing to bring up because the first time I ever played with Jeremy, if you remember that first session, Jeremy,
Fire, holy shit, fire, brother.
so we're sitting on the boat with Kara and Andrew's characters, and they see a bugbear, and I tell Jeremy, I look him dead in the eye. I'm like, I tell some crew member to take off their clothes, and he just looks at me like, what? And I'm like, yep. And then I roll for it, and I get it. So I get them to tie it to an arrow, and I shoot the arrow, but I shoot the arrow poorly, so it lands in the middle of the fire.
That's when I roll for Careless Whisper.
And then I started mimicking what I was saying, and then I said, like, when I got off the boat, I then start tearing into this thing and wearing its bowels, and just I could see Jeremy's face going like, what? What's going on?
Wearing its bowels.
And then
Yes,
like
we all wear bowels around town.
and then as I slowly committed to being the cult leader and being crazy, like
Slowly. There was nothing slow about it.
but I mean like one of my favorite moments was one of our first battles where we're fighting 3 bugbears, and I don't even attack. I run forward wearing bowels as a halfling saying, "Fire, holy shit, fire." And I try to convince these bugbears to run, and one of them doesn't, knocks me down, and then fire comes up on the tents, and then they run. And I'm like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Fuck,
for
man.
something to come naturally like that is, it takes a lot. I can imagine it. Like I like thinking about that now. If I was in your position, Jeremy, I would honestly be like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I don't know how I would deal with that. I know how I do it because I'm nuts sometimes. But like, kudos to you to
Sometimes.
not just play that, but like,
I only wake up on Mondays.
You take everything in stride.
thinking about
it's
wearing
pretty
people's
impressive.
bowels.
I
It
must
is.
say.
Again, like you took John trying to cut off his eyelids in stride. And
Control your actions. I am I'm my favorite DMing style is the mediator. And my number one rule is I don't tell my players no.
Like, are you
Your actions are your choice, right? You want to do something that is 100% up to you. I just have to run with it. Sometimes I have to stop and think about it for a second. Like, how would my creatures respond to this craziness?
you do a really good job of running with it.
I have been in some very odd situations before. I can definitely attest to that.
I'd be a bad DM.
I do actually
That's-
plan on doing cross party with some of my old party.
Oh,
I'm excited.
that'll be fun.
So you think you'd be a bad DM?
I think I'd be a bad DM because I'd ask people if they're proud of themselves and shit.
Oh no, that's part of the fun.
Okay.
But that's-
They are very proud of themselves.
See, here's the
That's
thing.
what I'm interested in.
Out of game, I am not happy that I did that. That I, cut out, that I did some of that stuff.
You weep softly in the
No,
Cut
no.
off your eyelids?
No, I'm really, but at the same time, like I said, I try to
Ooh.
RP.
Okay.
I try to role play, like if like as if I'm living. That's why I'm trying to write down our DM campaign.
You know what? Sorry to interrupt, but you just really enlightened me to an interesting question back on the writing sphere, because we've been talking about like what like DMing is and stuff, but like when you guys are writing, this is for every one of you. Do you find that in your particular style, when you write, you learn a bit about yourselves that you hadn't?
More every time.
Can you explain?
The
Like,
way you
just
would
give me-
think of something and the way it reacts, and then you think about how you might react in that same scenario and how those things are different.
Okay, so how about you? If you can think of any story in particular, do you think you could like enlighten us to one of those? If not, move on.
I mean, when I write, like it's the same way I play D&D, or the same way I play LARP. I go in LARP. I try to throw away myself completely. I try to not be me.
But that's how you find yourself.
And so when I write, especially when I'm writing perspectives, I usually, it's the only time I ever actually meditate, because the goal is I completely purge myself of me, and I try to become who I'm writing.
Very cool.
Okay.
The best way to do it, I find, is you just start to think about the person you're building. It's why I people watch a lot. It's why I'm really good at reading people. I do it a lot because I want to know, if I'm going to write someone that's like you, I want to know, and I want to know well what your reactions would be. And so when I'm writing, which is why once, like when it's why when I was told that never write the end of your story first, write the middle and the beginning. I find it helps so much because you know, you don't know where you're ending up, but you do know the events that are going to happen, and so you give yourself time to really understand the character in a way. And that's why I was about to say, like, when my character does something, me myself, I'm not happy with the way things are going, but I am not about to go around and tell Jeremy I want to redact that, or I want to get my sight back, or I want this back. I'd rather
Actually, that was a huge problem with my old party, is redacting and
See-
not liking the scenarios and stuff.
See-
And I did not. That was one of the things I don't like. Your choices are final.
Exactly. And I try to embody who my character is. And I know in Jeremy's campaign, when my character does something nuts, that's just my character.
Yeah.
I play him as insane. When you're insane, the voices in your head are the strongest and loudest. And so, and like it's the same with when I play my characters. I have a LARP character that I've introduced to Jeremy called Boots Lagoon. And he's just a farmer, but he's a farmer with necromantic powers, and he just tries to hide it because he wants to be a farmer. And so his whole life is about hiding this whole part of himself while trying to be the regular farmer. Or when I'm writing my stories, I try to embody my characters so that I understand their decisions, so I don't do anything that I would do. I do the things that they would do.
I feel you. So
So do I, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we all write the same way. So
Yeah.
you don't. So you specifically, since we're on you right now, you don't technically learn anything about yourself because you really heavily practice disembodiment. of yourself.
Exactly. The like when you say learn about yourself, I get yes and no, because I don't embody myself.
Are any of your characters loosely based upon yourself?
Funny enough, no. I actually kept myself out of my writing quite a bit out of fear, mostly. That it would become too. What's the word for it? Not easy. I think it would be too much to write myself, because I think so highly of myself. Like I have a huge ego, and so
No.
I mean, but like But it's true. Like, it's true.
Right.
I have such a huge ego. I don't think I could ever write myself. I don't think I could do it. But like, if I was, but I do have characters that do embody like parts of my friends, or like people that I've met, or people that I have had interactions with.
Yeah.
Well, it goes down that ladder, right?
I think we both heard how that word started.
Nothing.
Okay.
Yes or nothing.
Jeremy heard it too.
Okay.
Shall we move on?
Anyway, but no, I do my best to try and pull my and try to, and even if I'm writing like high science fiction, or I'm writing like something that's completely out to lunch, as we'll say, I want my characters grounded in reality, at least in some way.
At least in your reality,
Yeah.
some
Mhm.
perspective.
You know what I mean? Because I want my readers to be able to relate. I find that my favorite books, or the books that I become most attached to, are even the characters I may not relate with, but the characters that I learn to love. So like we talked about Game of Thrones. My favorite house is House Greyjoy. Like the villains of the entire story, and one of them gets castrated and flayed alive and used as a servant. But like they're my
Beautiful. Fucking beautiful.
That's so kind.
favorite
Mhm.
characters.
Yes,
But I hate like Daenerys. In the books, I hate Dany, and in the show, I hated Dany.
She's a blonde one, right?
Yeah, and
It's
so
good to see your bum though.
no, because what?
Sorry.
Do I need to show you? Never forget.
No, please.
That's what
Why
I
did
thought.
you have to bring that into this?
Anyway, no, I am, but like I find like when everyone got, like I said earlier before we started the stream, I predicted what was going to happen in Game of Thrones like well before it happened.
Yeah.
And it's not because I can read George R. R. Martin's mind, but like
I don't think you can read his own mind.
I think it's more that
Everybody dies.
I could see where her arc was going. It fit her character to go crazy. Like there's so much allusion to that family just being crazy because they're a bunch of inbreds. And so like for her to be the only normal one and the mother of dragons, I just thought like, no, that sounds way too convenient for George R. R. Martin and for this story. There's nothing convenient in Game of Thrones.
You explained it very well this time. Yes, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like there's no convenience. Like there's like you get really attached to a character and then they get their head cut off because that's reality in that.
Yep.
And so to have a Mary Sue is what they call her, or like a Mary Sue is someone like a woman character where everything comes easy. And there's also I forget what the name for the male character is, but yeah,
Berry stew.
yeah, something like that.
Hands?
Anyway, but the point is like he wrote an entire universe that I got used to reading where that wasn't the case. And so to have one, a very prevalent one, I focused on the flaws and no one else did. And I think that's gorgeous writing because you're able to show the flaws, but people get so caught up in Daenerys in that series that everyone was so shocked when she went crazy and burned down a city except me. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, about time. Like it makes sense to me. And like I saw like there's thousands of YouTube videos about it now where like, oh, this is not blah blah blah, and there's no lead up to this. And I'm like, you never read the books. They even do it in the show. You weren't watching. Because you're looking at Daenerys, you're not looking at the realm she lives in. And you're not putting together you're not putting together the actual world.
You're too. You're bringing yourself into the book too much.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're bringing yourself in the book too much, and you have tunnel vision. You can bring yourself into a book fully. Like I don't have a problem with that. It's all of a sudden getting tunnel vision, and I think that's a problem with a lot of writing. Is you get a main character who all of a sudden who lasts right to the end, and I think that's horrible writing. I mean, even in the Three Musketeers,
at least lasting in one state.
Yeah, but like if people haven't read the Three Musketeers, but if you read it, like they don't survive to the end. Only one of them does.
That's sad.
Of the four Musketeers, because there's four of them.
Yeah.
D'Artagnan makes it to the end, and he's not even a musketeer, so they all die. And it's
Isn't he
something.
a prison or some shit for most of it.
I have
Yep.
that. Long
Yeah,
time
that's
ago.
what I'm gonna change
And
figures.
like the sequel's The Man in the Iron Mask, but like that's one of the greatest books that no one's ever read.
Mhm.
But like if you ever read it, none of the musketeers live at the end. They all die progressively throughout the story. Shakespeare, it's so rare for a main character to make it to the end.
It's true.
I mean, one of my favorite Shakespeare plays of all time is a play called Titus and Andronicus. Play opens with a woman being raped by 6 men, and then she has her eyes gouged out, her tongue ripped out. She has her hands cut off so she can never point them out. And Titus, her father, it's about him trying to find these people, and eventually
Badass.
he figures out that she can still write. So he asks her,
That's the original
Hands?
Taken.
yeah, it is. And so he asks
Good with
her,
my toes.
write the names. And so she uses her dumb arm to write all the names in the sand. And so then Titus goes out and using that as evidence, murders each one of them. And it's like it's a revengeancer play. It's an Italian style of play that was from the early 16th century.
Oh, perfect.
But it's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite unknown stories. Macbeth. The entire story about the rise and fall of the Black King Macbeth. I mean, he doesn't live at the end, neither does his wife. Almost everyone dies except Duncan, and Duncan's
Yeah.
only in the play at the beginning and the end. I'm trying to think of another great
Romeo
Shakespeare.
and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet, they both, yeah,
They get right to
everyone
the end,
dies.
and then they die
Everyone dies
within
at the
minutes
end
of
of
each other.
And
You guys are really making it hard to be an optimist right now.
I know, right?
I mean, it's true though.
It's true, and such is life, and that's the
But it's
horror
not. It's
of
not.
its own.
It's not
Yeah.
life. It's just. It's so real.
Yeah.
It's the idea that like, especially because I think like because you're writing horror, I think that's a huge problem in horror. Is they try to make it too visceral. Like you have too many. Like if you see 5 people in the woods, you know only 1 or 2 of them are making it out,
Exactly.
and it's not fair. I think it would be like one of my favorite horror movies that isn't. It's a comedy. Have you ever seen Tucker and Dale vs. Evil?
Well, hang on. A good way to spin that would be that the group of 5 is actually the ones who are scary.
Have you ever seen Tucker and Dale vs. Evil?
All right, no.
So it's about 2 rednecks that live in the woods.
Okay.
And
Oh, I
these teenagers go out into the woods and they watch these 2 rednecks kill a deer, and they think that it was a human, so they think they're going to kill them. So these 5 teenagers try to kill Tucker and Dale. And so like there's a scene where they're like talking to one of the girls because they accidentally capture her, and she thinks that they're crazy redneck murderers. And one of the kids comes out of the forest with an axe screaming. And if you're like just some fucking farmer in the middle of the woods, you're like, holy fuck, holy fuck, holy fuck. And he pushes him into the wood chipper. But all the teenagers see is this guy push him into the wood chipper.
Yeah.
And so it gets completely exactly what you say. It gets completely turned on their head.
Yeah,
The
beautiful.
kids start dying, but they start dying and they're the villains.
And
Yeah.
is this a comedy horror?
Oh, it is
Yeah,
a
it
comedy.
is.
It's not horror. It's just comedy.
It's
funny.
I would like to see
Just
a horror.
comedy.
I would like to see a horror done in that style for sure.
But yeah, that would be a great horror.
Absolutely.
It's like
Mhm.
Rosemary's Baby.
Mhm.
I think that's one of my favorite horror movies of the whole time, but you would not know it's a horror movie until the last 5 minutes.
Well, that's kind of like what I'm trying to go for with the tension in the book, just building tension constantly and releasing tension, but never giving an ends to it. So the tension is always there for each moment
Oh,
until
wow.
like the end of the book.
Would you do a connected universe?
Yeah, I have a trilogy in my head right now.
Ooh,
But I mean,
exciting.
like, would you do like the Stephen King where everything's part of the one universe?
Yes.
It's just
That's exactly what I'm doing.
That's what I want to do with the world I created. I want to make this giant connected. There's a series of 5 books I want to write, but there's so many other things that I want to fit in around it. So many extra pieces that tell the story.
see, I'm not into that. I mean,
I
as
am.
science fiction, it's harder.
Yeah.
But like,
Well, I feel like
I've never
D&D
been.
universe
Like I said,
started
the
as a
story
single
covers, like,
entity and
2
now is it connected?
Yeah, I was gonna say D&D used to have like different realms. I mean,
Yeah.
wasn't Baldur's Gate and the
I'm
Far
using-
Realms like not even part?
Baldur's Gate is part of Faerun, and I use both Faerun and Eberron.
That's right. It's Faerun, Eberron, and the Far Realms. right?
No, fuck. What do they call it? Greyhawk.
Greyhawk, that's it.
That's like Ansalon.
Yeah.
Kryn.
But now it's all connected because of the Yawning Portal Tavern.
Yep. Which exists in Waterdeep, I think.
Yes.
You want to have like a story that people don't just finish the book and they end up on like, oh, that was a good book. You want to have something where people can keep reading throughout their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something I've thought. So like working in education and like early literacy and stuff, something I would love is to create a series that starts with a book that is for very young children who are just learning to read.
Mhm.
And then the next book's a little more complicated. And then a little more complicated until you end up with, so like the first one would be like almost entirely pictures with a few words.
So like Harry Potter.
Except
Exactly.
so much more than that.
I'm just saying.
We're starting with picture books.
The first book is for like ages 10 and up.
No,
and
the
then
first book is for like age 5.
And then the last book of Harry Potter is for young adults. I
Yeah.
mean, she basically did that.
That's what I want to do though. Like start with like
goal.
with picture books.
That's also because
move my way up to like a young to like an
right?
early reader series. There's like I
That's
don't know.
true, Jeremy.
I spend a lot of time with children's books, like the Magic Treehouse series.
Yeah. A great series.
Yeah, right? They're so annoying. There's a much better one that I have, but anyways, but like work my way up to that, and then like from there start with like the really early, like the really beginner chapter books, and just like each next one is a little bit harder.
What would you call
until
that?
you
Like
end up with
life curriculum genre?
I don't think there's a word.
It's
Well,
inventive.
you're a
I'll
writer.
try to
Make
invent
one
one.
up.
Okay. Blobber.
I'm gonna invent one.
Blubber Blub. You heard it here first, folks.
I don't know.
Well, it's a great idea. It's not even simply like a unifaceted concept. It's you're thinking beyond the book at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, the story that I
So
want
it's
to tell spans.
multifaceted.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that.
The
to these
story I
guys.
want to tell spans. The story I want to tell spans 2,000 years, and it just picks like 5 points in time from those 2,000 years. So there's so much happening around it, and I want to tell that as well.
Well, have you ever read or I mean, like a lot of people don't realize the amount of lore that goes into some things. Like, have you ever read or decided to immerse yourself in like the Elder Scrolls lore?
I have not.
That's something you
Yeah.
might really want to, because the entire Elder Scrolls role from game 1 to the current game,
Which is like 6 at this point.
5,
Five?
6 is
Yeah.
coming. But
Yeah,
the
6
point
is coming.
the point is the entire games span 4,000 years.
Yeah.
Each game is only a blip in time, but there's actually a person who's hired at Bethesda,
God damn.
and their entire job is to make sure the lore matches up. And they have
Okay.
thousands of small books in the game that you can read.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah,
And-
Jens told me that.
that guy has a gun to his head.
What?
That fucking
Oh.
Bethesda guy.
Dude, but like the amount of intricacy that goes into that lore, and it is literally because you are literally spanning that lore, like you're expanding it, and so like it's so well done how it all links together. But it's literally like if you go through the games, you kill this great mage who then when you play Elder Scrolls Skyrim, you read books about this horrible mage from thousands of years ago and how he broke up the world, or you meet like the point is and then explains why changes happen because it's been hundreds of years since this happened, or like it's really interesting and how
That's really
it
cool,
all works.
Mhm.
That's a level of dedication that comes with writing, especially like it's fantasy. It's right up your alley.
Mhm.
There's something cool about Fallout too. Since you're talking about Bethesda, I was watching Bethesda, tomato.
No, like please continue.
In Fallout, another Bethesda model.
Not Fallout.
Fallout.
In
Fallout.
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 There's a statue that you can find from like Fallout fucking 1 to Fallout 4, and even the new one that sucked ass. That nobody can explain, and I've watched a couple videos of it on YouTube, and supposedly this this statue which you can find in the bottom of caves if you follow some side quests where people are going crazy and they're digging mines and stuff like that. It's actually like Cthulhu mythos.
Oh,
Yeah, it
cool.
is.
Yeah.
They think that I remember reading that or seeing a video on it, how they think the community believes that the story of Fallout is aliens actually were invading the planet
Yeah.
because they were trying to find out the connection between
Cthulhu. Yeah.
and so
And
the
that's
American
the main premise
and
of
the-
the actual game.
yeah,
Is this stupid side quest.
and the American government figured this out, and so as a way to try and stop it, they actually tried to fight the aliens, but the aliens triggered by firing the first nuke, and because they fired the first nuke in China thought it was America, and then that's how the nuke started, and it was actually the aliens that started the original apocalypse, and the children of Adam are what happened to the Cthulhu worshippers.
And the cool side story to that side story is that there's zero evidence of Cthulhu, and it was all just a fucking mental projection of the people's fear.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's a side quest to these
That's
every
crazy.
single main game that has persisted through every single main game.
Yeah, it's fucking insane. Like the level of detail they put in.
Yeah.
There was something else I was thinking of. Another game with really good lore in that type. It'll come to me. The Witcher. If you ever read the Witcher books, the Witcher books.
I've read just like little bits and pieces of them, and I really like them.
So the game and the final book in the series, and in the final game, The Witcher 3, one of the expansions. So throughout the game, they do it way better than the book. In the book, you have Geralt go through his life, and every so often he sees something, and he does say in the book, like, that guy looks familiar. He looks familiar. Every so often he sees, and it's always described. One time in the second book, he describes this guy. He looks familiar. Short, bald, stubby looking, but he just looks like any other human. In the games, if you go back to the Witcher first game, every single cutscene from the first game right till the third game, there's a bald guy who's short, has stubby and ears, and like a little white guy. So that is Gontar Dim, God. And the story is, amongst everything else in The Witcher, all this stuff happens to Geralt because God, he's how do I describe this? So he's infinite, right? For some reason, he has full control over this plane of reality until a certain point, and then he's gone for 3,000 years, and all he knows is it's because of Geralt. And God in the Witcher universe is evil. He purposely made this plane of existence and stole humans, stole vampires from different gods and different realities, stole them just so they could fight. And he purposely stirs the shit pot because he's just a kid. Basically, he's just a kid who doesn't like, where he is known by other deities and their realities as just an asshole. And so and then all of a sudden in the final book, and in the final chapter, you finally meet Gontar Dim officially, and you realize that was everything that's ever happened to Geralt was because Gontar Dim tried to kill him, but he can't, because it's just, for some reason, that's the nexus that happens.
It's not even a side quest like writing, is it? It's less than a side quest writing. It's like it's just a subliminal hint.
Yeah, the whole time.
Yeah.
But like it is actually the huge focal point of the entire story, is the fact that God is trying to kill Geralt so that there isn't a 3,000 year blip. And then in the books, and if you do it right in the game, you actually banish him, and he starts speaking languages that we understand in our reality but don't exist in Geralt's.
This brings a question to my mind. Is the reason for like that Cthulhu mythos from Fallout, and the reason for this what was his name? God, you called him Geralt?
Ooh,
What'd you call him?
Gontar Dim.
Just to answer the quick question, we are talking, I am a science fiction writer, we have a fantasy writer, and a horror writer. We just talk about whatever, And right
We
now
also have a really fantastic D&D DM on the line.
on chat, and we're just currently talking about stories.
Yeah. So, in essence, is the reason why these huge overarching subliminal subtexts are present in stories like this, is that because they're less interesting than the political and socioeconomic status of the characters and how they're performing these actions? Or is it like, how do you put this? Well, it's basically that. Is it less interesting to follow something that's controlling everything versus people who are not in control? Does that make sense to you guys?
No.
Kinda.
Like every single person who reads a book is a human being as we know them.
Maybe.
And every single person on Earth has a control complex. It doesn't matter what it is, it's in some facet or another. So when you're reading about a character, my question is pertaining to the overarching theme of, like a god controlling this, or there is an orchestrating entity that is guiding everybody towards the climax and the antagonizing factor of the novel. Um, is it just more interesting to read about this tiny political strife that characters are having here and there and here and there and here and there continuously, or is there another reason why that it always seems to be like Gantaro Dim or whatever his name is?
I think
are
the answer you're
behind?
looking for comes into weaving and narrative. I mean, like what you're really asking is when you hyper focus on some sort of political struggle, like the kingdom's in danger, and like, oh no, there's this great evil coming. But in reality, like the entire story is about some crazy wizard who keeps doing crazy magics that allow this to happen. What you're saying is like, I guess my point to you is, what you're really asking is it better to have the overarching story that forces people to get invested in the narrative and then have this in the background rather than work as with just kind of a blank slate?
It's like what is the motivation behind it? I guess is the question. Like when you were just explaining something there, I thought of like some stories want to give you everything and give you things and let you understand the world. And then suddenly Kentaro Dim and the Cthulhu mythos, which with statues you have to find in the video game, um, is it like dingleberries held up for you? Like you have everything, but
Well,
suddenly as somebody who's
unlike, well,
voyeur.
I'll just talk about the books of The Witcher in that case, because
Okay.
like the way he writes it, I forget that writer's name too. And you can say with a lot of high fantasy, like even Lord of the Rings, or Jar Jar Martin, like they'll tell you, or at least what I've read from biographies is you want there to be questions that you never answer.
Yeah, exactly.
You want there to be things that you explore, you can fathom as a reader, what they are, but they're never actually put into context. It's the entire idea of cosmic horror.
It's an Easter egg.
It's an Easter egg, but at the same time, it's also a pivot for your reader to imagine, and all of a sudden they feel more engaged.
Okay, so I have this idea that I want to put into fruition with my fantasy horror, where I don't fully explain, or I don't go into full detail about like some of the townships, but I do explain a bit of their political influences on the entire realm of the novel. Um, so would you say that's like a similar facet to what's going on with these like deities in The Witcher and Fallout? Whereas I'm leaving this so that when people read the book, if they enjoy it and I continue past the book, that I will my full intent mentally, I have this as an awareness, is to have people who enjoy the book write fan fiction about it and to leave
Yeah.
spots open for them.
I mean that's what happens.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay.
I think Lovecraft's your best idea of that. You have this entire cosmic horror where he would describe, I think the only real cosmic entity he ever described was Azathoth, this giant pit of writhing tentacles that has no mind. And so, and he described that, I forget which story it was, but he described that as the
That's the
pinnacle.
one where they go to the North Pole and they unbury it from the ice.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds like an ex of mine.
It's a short story. It's only like 13 or 14 pages long or something like that.
That's kind of typical.
Terrifying. That's one of his better pieces.
But the point is all of a sudden you have this giant unknowable thing that's supposedly in his mythos that he created. The part that he actually created is this giant thing that spawns the universe. So from there, and then you have these things where he describes, like, one of the things in Shadow over Innsmouth. They eventually take the main character into the basement where it's about to be eaten by this giant thing, but all he ever describes inside this vat is an eye. That's all Lovecraft describes. Everything else attributed to that is fan fiction, and is essentially, like, the entire Cthulhu mythos of Cthulhu is fan fiction.
Perfect horror.
But at the same time, it's not about fan fiction at that point as much as it's you're trying to contribute.
I just thought of like a serious meta concept. It's you're not describing the monsters so that the readers in the future come through to finish your fan fiction are the ones who actually kill the monsters for society.
Ooh, interesting.
Because once you describe the monster, technically they're already dead. That's kind of a cool meta concept.
That is cool.
Ain't it? Yeah, it's pretty tight. Fuck yeah, I'm glad we went down this avenue of conversation.
I mean, especially when
once you see the monster in a horror movie, you kind of take away all the fear.
Well, exactly.
It's why,
what is it?
If we're going down that alley, I would say the best monster in monster movies I have ever seen, at least personally, Jeepers from Jeepers Creepers.
Can you explain why? Because that's an interesting
choice. He's based off a song from the 30s.
Yeah.
And the reason is, especially in the first movie, you never get to see him. And you don't know what his purpose is. Like, you don't know anything about it, and it leaves you on that.
Until the end, and then it's still jarring. It's still very jarring at the end.
But you still have no idea what happened. Like, you watch the guy die and get picked up, and then but you don't understand. And then the second movie, I found it ruined it, kind of.
Absolutely, dude.
I mean, it was still a good movie. I will argue that
except for the school bus scene.
That was actually one of the most memorable parts.
Oh, absolutely memorable, but I can't fucking forget. It will never leave my mind.
I mean, they made fun of it in South Park perfectly.
Did they? I missed that.
My god, that's such a good episode. But no, I find that monster was one of the better ones in terms of writing.
The first movie, absolutely perfect.
And like I've watched a lot of movies and a lot of horror. And like it's very hard to find something that jarring.
Yeah, and how do you get something so cheeky to be so fucking menacing? Like the beating you. Like it's already menacing with beating you, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, be eating you. Like it's
creepy.
Yeah, it's very, very wild writing. It's like giving. It's that Dangleberry again. It's giving you like a small taste of fear, and then it's like, oh my god, you didn't understand anything. It's giving you things and making you understand them in one light, so you do understand it, but then it moves on past that. So that's you're right. That great suggestion, man. Jeepers Creepers is a fucking phenomenal horror film.
I'm just trying to think of like in The Thing. I mean, I liked The Thing, and I would say that's a great horror monster in the way he's written, or the way it's written. But at the same time, it becomes pretty, I think, like about halfway through the movie, it goes from being a psychological and an actual thriller to more of a body horror. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it became that early, yeah.
Like all of a sudden it's more like, well, who's gonna turn into a giant toothy monster next? And like it takes away, I've
never been a fan of body horror.
I can see that.
Yeah, I love psychological, but body horror,
On that
Yeah.
same note, one of the greatest horror movies of the 2000s, I will argue to the death, the greatest horror movie from 2000 to now, because we're not going, if we go back further, I have other ones, but from the greatest horror movie made so far is the original Saw.
I've never seen it.
I will argue to hell and back. The Ring has nothing on it.
Whole
You could,
movie is filmed basically in one room.
and it's not even
really?
that. It's not even that makes it amazing. It's
I know what it is.
it's how intricate that movie is, and how there is nothing that you can pretty much, you can't look at that movie and find an actual flaw in terms of when they're in those room scenes.
And don't explain what I know you want to explain just because she hasn't seen it.
Oh yeah, I won't.
Okay.
But no, I consider Saw
Spoilers mean nothing.
like the original
it's a
Saw.
big one.
Every other Saw
Still
movie
doesn't matter.
is
I don't like
shit.
surprises.
Let me go on camera and say this. Every other Saw movie is shit.
It's very true.
But
The second one had its points, but no.
Was the second one have that girl who reached into the fucking
Yes, it did.
the needle
The
pit?
second one's when she gets tossed into
Oh,
the
I remember
pit.
people talking
Yeah.
about that in school.
That was so dumb.
And that was like the hardest scene to watch. I was like, jeez. And
Yeah.
the rest of the movie was lame.
I
No.
remember people talking about that in school and just cringing.
but the first
Mhm.
one, it's got the psychological horror, it's got the body horror, it's got the actual jump scare horror, and it doesn't force it ever. Not once. Even that last scene, which it's drilled into my mind, is
Yeah, of
so.
course. That last scene is so good.
But it's so pivotal to the movie because if you think about like the way the movie progressed, like it makes so much sense. It's so well done, and I'm so sad that the whole Saw series got ruined after that. But like,
Well, it turned into torture porn after that.
and I mean, if you wanted to watch torture porn at that time, you just watch Hostel.
Japan has
I
way
was
better
just gonna
torture.
say that was birthed out of that movie, and then you got stuff like the Human Centipede, which
Ooh.
kind of dueled up on the body horror and that.
The Human Sentai pad.
It all
Yeah,
came
that
out of,
episode is hilarious.
Right.
it all came out of Japan.
I
you
couldn't
guys.
watch them. I've never seen the Human Centipede though. I
Oh,
literally-
no.
I
Body
did.
body
I was
horror
like, I don't
was
need to see this.
Body horror was what's his name before it went to Japan. That was God damn it, Cronenberg. Cronenberg did a body horror, and then
Yeah.
Japan took it
Yeah.
and cranked it to 11. I mean, Videodrome,
Well, dude,
Existence.
Miyake has been doing fucking torture porn for a long time, since like the fucking late 60s.
Hi, Kitty.
That still doesn't beat Cronenberg.
Doesn't beat Cronenberg?
No,
You sure?
Cronenberg did the original thing, like the 1950s.
Okay.
I think.
Well, the original thing
Don't
wasn't
quote
really
me on that.
The original thing was not a body horror torture porn film. But like Miyake would do really, really fucking weird shit, like turn people's bodies into things that didn't exist. Like there was a scene in one of his first movies, and it's dumb. You can't call it torture porn, but you could call it like body horror, where this guy goes to pick up the girls who were stuck in a house, and there's a deity at the gates of the house that lets people in or denies them. And this guy rolls up to pick up the girls, and he starts questioning about like where the girls are, and he states what he's going to do, and the deity doesn't like this, so he turns his whole body into a pile of fruits inside of his convertible. His fingers are fucking bananas, his head's like a watermelon, his full body's there. But that was like original kind of body horror.
Huh.
Yeah. It was so funny at the end of that film.
I just find body horror usually just gross. It just grosses me out. It doesn't scare me.
It's tasteless. You gotta have taste.
Yeah,
But
but
I mean, like-
psychological horror gets to me because I think I'm just more scared of my own mind than I am of anything else.
I agree and disagree with the body horror's taste. I mean, you watch Eraserhead or you watch
That's
Videodrome.
beautiful body horror is Eraserhead.
I mean, like,
Oh, it's either gross or
but it's not
in
about.
particular things. It if it's not gross, it's just too visceral to me.
Yeah.
See, I think you need
And
to
then
watch.
I don't want to watch it. It just makes me feel sick.
But isn't that getting the job done right?
That is.
Probably.
I was gonna say, like,
but I
if
don't
you-
like it.
Like,
Exactly.
have you ever seen Eraserhead?
No.
Ugh.
So, like,
Ugh.
it's done in black and white, and the point Lynch was trying to get is just you're just supposed to feel uncomfortable. You're not supposed to be scared.
See, I don't like
You're
that.
just supposed to feel uncomfortable.
It's just
And like there's long shots in dim light, and like the sound in the background is just the hum of light sometimes. It's meant
Yeah.
to
I just
create that
don't-
feel where you have Videodrome.
I don't understand why I would watch that when I could watch something that I will actually enjoy.
Well, that's
But
the
that's
point.
So
well, their idea is not about enjoying a film. Their idea is about feeling from a film.
Well, it's meta. It's another
Yeah.
meta breaking concept.
Yeah.
I don't like
Absolutely.
meta things.
Yes.
Oh, Metabots
Maybe
was
that's the
cool.
problem.
I've never seen Metabots.
Metabots.
Do they have good metabolisms?
You have no idea what Metabots are?
Metabolism? Metabolism?
I'm so sad.
Now you're just getting into botulism, and that's a problem.
Hey,
Only for
botulism is one step below hedonism.
Is
Isn't
it?
Isn't it?
Botulism? Like the really horrifying disease? Like, or virus or parasite or whatever it is?
Oh, I was thinking. Yeah, never mind.
Like
Oh.
the foodborne illness?
I just have to say it. I just have to say it now, but when you were talking about the Three Stooges, for some reason I was getting, or the Three Musketeers, I was getting really hungry. Anyway, continue.
Oh, that was the worst product placement I've ever heard.
Oh wow, I didn't even realize I did that.
yeah, bastards.
Oh shit!
But,
try and plan that.
I
next
guess
time.
we all get shaped by our stories that we read as kids. I mean, that's something I've also heard. So like when I was a kid, I read Isaac Asimov, I read Aldous Huxley, and thanks to my dad, he's a huge science fiction guy, so he gave me Dune. I read the Tripod series.
Okay.
I mean,
Well,
Foundations. I had to read Foundations at 13.
Yeah, I had foundations math. That was a joke. I didn't. I was just joking.
That was sad. That was really sad. Math jokes are not allowed.
Math jokes are the best, but
Foundations.
that was a bad
guys.
one.
That was really bad. But no, like I had to read the actual, like, if you ever seen the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov, all 4 books, they're like this big all together, and like imagine a 13-year-old kid given this by your dad, and you're like, here, read this, and I'm like, it took me a while, but like it really shaped how I liked stories. I mean,
Yeah.
I started thinking about science fiction at a young age. Like my first ever story I wrote that year at 13, so we had to write stories, was I wrote an entire story about how plants became sentient and started murdering the world, and the entire story was about my class at the time and how all of us get picked off one by one. Even I died. Like, I died right at the beginning. I made sure I killed myself off quick because I was a fat kid, so I knew I wouldn't make it. Like, so I remember, and I think I still have it somewhere.
Juicy boy.
This whole story I wrote about how everyone died. Everyone died except one. I remember I saved one of my classmates, and then I had to read it in front of everyone.
Was she the cute one?
It was a he.
Was
he the cute one?
No, he was just the most athletic and the most likely to live because his dad was super rich.
So
he'd
maybe
have-
the cute one.
So he'd have access to a rocket ship, which is where it all leaded.
And a good haircut.
Okay.
Uh,
A good haircut?
but anyway,
I'm just joking.
no, because but I still remember reading this story in front of the class, and it was a pretty big hit because I mean it was pretty well written. I was pretty visceral with the way people got torn apart by these plants.
13-year-olds love hearing about their own deaths.
I
Like,
noticed.
actually.
It's actually kind of nice.
I do.
And
But,
their classmates' deaths? Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
as I
Oh,
kept
especially.
writing, as I got older, like one of my actual published stories is about a guy who has these really visceral, fantastic dreams. It's called Fading Dreams. Is the name of my story, and it's basically about him. The first thing he sees, the first scene I set up, is he sees this blue woman with red hair, and he's trying to reach her through this really weird reeds, these really purpley reeds, and he can't. He kind of falls, and as he keeps falling in each dream that he has, there's a bit of a snippet of people talking in the background, but I purposely put in different letters and muffle it because you would only hear parts, right? And what's happening is every time he has a dream, the next dream he goes through an extreme amount of pain, and then he has the same dream except it's slightly different. And he's in the way I write it is he forgets what was different. And it's not until he's eventually done that he's retained one memory because he knows this is happening. He can feel it happening, but he can't think of why. And you piece together, as his parents take him away in a wheelchair, he was married and his wife died drowning. They were out in the middle of a lake, and they have these centers called a memory tuning center, which is one of the last things he reads, and he has no idea what the place is, but it slowly comes to him what it actually means. And you can go to these places and have memories of. It's based off of. If you ever watched a beautiful Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, it's that same idea where you can go to this fancy place and they'll erase memories of someone. Except in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where they keep meeting up and meeting up and meeting up. In my version, it's about a guy who lost his wife, and it would be about, and the one that I published, it's about him forgetting, and that moment when he realizes what's happened, and that's how the story ends. Is that question that he asked himself: Did I do the right thing, forgetting my wife? And that's how I leave my short story. And so I kind of make my stories essentially sometimes more modern, but sometimes I try to put them in the far future, where like the current story I'm writing, which is about humanity and how it's expanded to the stars. The idea that we just keep moving forward and we don't look back is basically the point where I've started past. I picked a point, a huge event in my story that started years and years and years and years and years ago, so that it's something that can be reflected upon. Something that when readers actually read it, they want to know the whole story. They want to know what's happened, but I'm not going to give that to them. I'm going to give them pieces. I'm going to give them memories. I'm going to give them something that makes it feel like they're grasping onto it or they're trying to build it together. George R. R. Martin talks about this a lot too, but they're ruining it by making the story of how Jon Snow was conceived. That whole idea of his parents fleeing down and conceiving a kid, and the entire Great War that was happened 50 years earlier in the story, or the thing about the Targaryens going over and taking over. You're not supposed to go into that. Same with Lord of the Rings. You're not supposed to have seen the final battle between Sauron when he actually was alive and he gets his finger cut off.
Yeah.
That's just a story.
Yeah.
Now in the movie they show it.
In the movie they start with it.
But what you're actually supposed to do to have a really good story, something that hooks people, is you have a pivotal moment that's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then where you go from there depends on your writer.
And that's why prequels suck so often.
But sometimes you have a movie that just starts in the middle.
Yeah.
So like it depends if the writer intended it. It's hard to
a little bit grumpy. Somebody doesn't do so well with drugs, huh?
And so I yeah, no, that's how I sorry, my cat hissed at Justin and it just made us all laugh. It's
really loud.
really hard to keep that going.
She's had tons of catnip.
I guess my point is, one of the biggest crux of writing, I've noticed, and especially in works that become extremely famous, like if I go even further back to Ernest Hemingway in The Sun Also Rises. The Sun Also Rises is about a bunch of people who survived World War One, and how they're all maimed in some way, or there's something that happened to them, and some of them have shell shock. Some of them like the main character, he can't get it up. Mm-hmm. He was shot, I think, in the leg, and so he has so he has a limp, and it actually made him I forget the actual gentleman's word for it is.
Impotent?
Impotent. Thank you. And it's a huge crux of the story. You never hear fully what happened. You get bits and pieces throughout the story, but the entire book, The Sun Also Rises, is about the aftermath. And so you get pieces of World War One, and you get some stories, but it's all about the aftermath. And it's considered one of the greatest pieces of English literature. And you're constantly fighting for that meaning. But then Ernest Hemingway gives it to you in bullfights. So there's these really visceral bullfights, and he doesn't pull any punches. It's just like bullfighting. People come out, they spear the bull, and as more people come out and spear the bull, and once the bull is basically bleeding profusely and can't fight, then the bullfighter comes out. Everyone cheers, and he comes out to this bull that's literally half dead and stabs it in the brain every time. And the main character doesn't understand how this bullfighter is so perpetually famous when he never actually fights the bull.
Mm-hmm.
The bull's pretty much dead. And it's one of, and I could even put that in, I could even look to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and say the same idea. He, sorry, I'll let you chime in a second.
Okay.
But he basically puts the entire story is about this point where humanity decided to either live in sin and just do whatever they want, or they actually be civilized and start taking this drug called soma and become more open. And you always hear about this pivotal moment, but it never actually happens. And so and that's why the juxtaposition of the director's kid who goes to the wildlands, sees what it's like, and then takes a kid back with him. And then the kid who comes back with him after seeing what life is like in the modern place realizes that it's both crap, and he hangs himself. That's the way the book ends. And so I think a crux like that, something that you can fall back to as a writer, but you can draw mystery from as a reader, is really what propels a book to be so inviting in that sense. Yeah. Harry Potter, you could even say they had that with Harry Potter getting the scar. Yeah. Eventually J.R.R. Tolkien basically gives you the baby in the bathwater, but there's a whole lead up to that before you realize what was going on around that.
I'm confused if you just mixed authors. You were talking about Harry Potter and then Tolkien.
I was just saying she does that.
Yeah.
When Harry Potter gets the scar.
J.K. Rowling?
Yeah, J.K. Rowling.
You said Tolkien.
Sorry. All these.
I was confused if you were trying to make a point combining the two. Or...
It's fine. It's fine. No, just messed up my words.
Okay.
The last two you were talking about reminded me of movies, and this might be like a late night kind of stupid brain thought, but Black Swan and Neon Demon. Have you seen those films?
I've seen Black Swan. I've never heard of Neon Demon.
Yeah, me neither.
Okay, well, it's just one of those like rise without the struggle kind of concepts that you were talking about in like the last story you were talking about 2 stories ago. Pardon me for not remembering the names.
Sun Also Rises?
John talks a lot, so.
Yeah, I think it was The Sun Also Rises. That one really reminded me of the Neon Demon plotline where this girl, essentially, it's about the depravity of models and what they go through mentally. And the whole fear of the movie is watching the decline of their personalities in many senses, and like how their empathy leaves them. And the ghost in the movie is essentially their empathy. And they eventually turn on each other, and it's a very gross movie. And it finishes off. Don't watch it. It's a bad film.
Good to know.
But it's such a strange plot twist where this new girl, she's like 19 or less. She's underage. She's underage for being a model, and she's competing with women who have been in the scene of age for multiple years, and the world just wants to see this girl. And she is she has a hard life at the beginning, and then immediately is picked up from like a motel chain to be this supermodel because she's so thin and she's had such a depraved life that she just receives everything because the world wants to see her. And all the other models eventually surround her and like fucking push her into an empty pool and kill her. And then at the end of the film, they eat her. And that's the end of the fucking movie, is where they're on this set all these older women are on the set in like fucking the beautiful setting where it's like the Bahamas. It's like an island resort, not even an island resort. It's a floating ocean resort. And all you see is like this very modern contemporary building with a pool, and there's no grass, no anything outside. It's just open water. It's empty. It's barren, but they have everything they wanted to build. And they go into the room and they're just like puking up like bits of this girl that they ate.
Oh,
Yeah,
gross.
it's metaphorical. You don't say.
Sure, yeah.
It just sounds gross to me.
It is gross.
I see the metaphor.
Yeah, I would say the metaphor is probably.
I mean, in Black Swan, she literally eats her competition.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think that's why I brought that up.
Eats out.
Hey yo.
Yeah.
Similar context.
That is one of the funniest scenes in that movie. It's so random.
Right? It's just so weird.
I mean, it makes sense in context if you really look at the movie.
Does it?
It does. I mean, the idea that this girl, like, if you don't idolize, but you think this girl's going to take your job as the Black Swan, and you
make them surrender to you.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But she doesn't. She wants to. It's almost like there's a really great movie about it. Okay, I can think of the scene of the movie where the lady, this crazy lady in black and white, goes, "I'm ready for my close up." But what a lot of people don't realize is that movie is about an actress. Oh, fuck! I wish I knew the name.
There's a name that she says after that, like, "I'm ready for my close-up, Mr." something.
Yeah. So the idea is this actress, she's fading, right? She's not very well liked anymore. She's not very famous. And there's this young actress who's basically got all of Hollywood's attention. And I can't remember the movie, but I think she either kills her or she breaks her legs. And everyone sees this happen. And so the girl, it's about this woman basically descending into madness over fame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very similar concept. Yeah. And that touches upon the same kind of like growth of a character as you were mentioning in Sunshine. What?
The sun also rises. I'm kind of sad you don't know Hemingway.
It's all well, I actually was going to ask this question way earlier in the night, which is, do you guys consider yourselves readers more than writers, or writers more than readers? Because I'm definitely a writer more than a reader.
I do both.
I like to not have an influence.
For me, it definitely depends.
I have many.
If I read, I have a reading problem. If I start a book, nothing can make me put it down. Not hunger, not needing to go to the bathroom, not having requirements and like obligations in my life.
That's very cool.
It's not.
No, it's
actually a huge problem.
So what you're saying is give you some really epic books.
Oh
no, because you'll kill her.
That's the point. Like what?
So I actually have like rules for myself around when I will and will not read. I do tend to read a lot more kids books or like YA books because they're shorter. Because I know that I can read them all at once without killing myself.
Sorry, the worst prank would be to like get you really drunk and like rip out the pages of a really good book and paste them all over the walls.
Oh my god, it's so good.
If I drink, all I want to do is read. It's it's the worst.
And then just put a bottle of vodka by you for the next morning.
I hope your husband is watching this because that sounds like the best April Fool's prank ever.
No.
Yeah, just get you drunk and then having them in random order too. So you have to find the page.
I would just cry over the broken book.
Shotgun a book
That's great.
But like, whenever I'm in school, if I have like obligations to like write essays or whatever, like anytime that I'm in school and it's a semester, I cannot read a book. I can't pick up a book. It's just a rule I have. Unless I have like a week off and I know as a fact I have nothing to do, I don't let myself read.
What about the school reading?
That's boring. I don't want to do that, so that's fine.
That's like some of the best reading I've ever had.
You didn't do an education degree.
I'm gonna write you a 65.
I have more self-respect than that.
I'm gonna write you a 65,000 word book that only has 2 different words in it.
Have you ever heard of Unoya?
No.
There's a Calgary writer. His name's Christian Bach. He works at U of C. He wrote an entire book, and it's infamous because each chapter has a vowel. And all the chapters make sense. The book makes sense. It is a story, but each chapter with that vowel, every single word has to have that vowel, and only that vowel.
Interesting.
So no other vowels.
Another
Yeah.
meta-breaking concept.
So
That would
first
be
is
horrifying.
A, and then you read the chapter, and it's everything has an A, and it still makes sense. Complete sense.
Very.
But
And
no
then-
other vowels other than A?
No other vowels other than A.
That's a really limited list of words.
You'd be surprised.
No,
So
I
what
wouldn't.
What if
That's
you,
a really limited list of words.
what if you took
No.
a precursor word? Like I said, it would write you 6.
I'm not kidding. It's actually quite a well-written book. It's called Eunoia. It's all the vowels put together in a word.
I'd write you a book with the, and I'd make you wonder the entire time what the fuck I'm talking about.
I don't like that.
The one.
Well, you have to read it first.
But is it also like It's
The-
by-
Christian
So, like-
Bach.
no? But like, there's a difference between vowel sounds and like vowel letters. So it's by the letter itself, not by the sound.
By the letter, yes, not by the sound.
Interesting.
So it does work.
don't
It's
like that.
it's one of my. It's actually one of
Does
my.
it have like vowel combinations like OU?
Nope.
She's getting visibly angry.
Right? I don't like this.
No, there's no combos.
No,
This
No.
style infuriates me.
No.
Well, that's why I love Christian Bach. He got a literary award and a honorary biochemical degree from UCLA because he took two amoebas and he made them a poem and he stuck them together and it started to reproduce and it's now a living organism that it was let loose on the world and it's a poem.
How?
I don't know. He won. He did it.
But how are two amoebas a poem?
Like it's the same one. He took those ones that like exist in like the gas vents of the earth or something, like those little tiny microorganisms.
Extremophiles.
Yeah, and so he was able to input certain proteins in them. That every protein, I know
Yeah.
this from my sister, has a letter.
Yeah.
And so what he did is he wrote a poem, and he put half of it in one, half of the other, but he wrote it in such a way with the genome that every time they reproduce, it'll make a new poem.
I don't like that either.
He is amazing.
That's pretty smart.
He's
Wow,
so
that's
cool.
crazy.
That's a topic that we
I
should
don't-
definitely pick
yeah.
up on as meta. I like that topic.
That's right. But it is getting close. It is 2 hours, which is our close time. So thank you, Justin, for coming on the show.
You're welcome. It's a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Sarah, for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Thank you, disembodied voice Jeremy, for being always watching.
Always watching.
And-
The spirit of Jack.
I don't know.
And
always there.
the spirit of the likeness. Thank you for watching us.
Yes. Very important. The likeness.
Thanks for everyone watching. I'm sorry that you had nothing better to do with your life, but thank you for tuning in.
That was a great apology.
You're welcome. I'm
Glad
gonna
you
call it
chose
my
to spend your
sign-off.
time with us.
I'm sorry you had nothing better to do with your life. That's
Yeah.
great sign off. I love
That's-
it.
I think it's the best.
I love it.
All right.
Goodbye.